And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Welcome to Thurber Night. I know this morning I posted that it was the dog that bit people. It's not the dog that bit people. The dog didn't bite people this week. This week, it's the day the dam broke. And you're going to be happy with the day the dam broke because it's very funny. And the dam actually did, well, no, the incident actually did occur. You can look it up if you Google 1915 Columbus, Ohio dam break. Indeed, there was a panic and people ran just as Thurber describes. Anyway, it's a joy to have you here. Let's see what's been happening here. Oh, the big thing this week. Many of you know kindly Dr. Charbonneau. Kindly Dr. Charbonneau, who loves to go on his rounds and visit in the neighborhood with his patients. It's very bad when the birds are his patients. It never goes very well for them. But generally, you know, he goes and visits the neighbors and gets snacks and hangs out with his friend Breeze. And anyway, this week, kindly Dr. Charbonneau got into an altercation with Mr. Skunk. And he came back inside at about 8 p.m. He'd nearly come in at about 6:45. But then he said, no, I have one more. I need to do my rounds one more time. And at 8 p.m., I heard a scrabbling sound outside. And I opened the door, and there was an odor, ladies and gentlemen. There was a definite odor out there. And kindly Dr. Charbonneau stumbled back into the house, and his eyes were watering, and he was drooling, and his sides were heaving like he was about to throw up. And he smelled colorful. And he went and hid out in the kitchen, and Yorkie, the other cat, was laughing at him. It was awful, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, thank goodness for Scouts Honor Skunk Odor Repellent. Scouts Honor Skunk Odor Remover. Recommended to me by Trumpy Man. Trumpy Man runs the pet store in town. The pet supply store. He's got all the bumper stickers on his car of Biden, not my president, and let's go, Brandon. And he's the nicest man on earth. We love Trumpy Man. Anyway, Trumpy Man suggested this Scouts Honor, and what you do, I just got a washcloth, and I got it sopping wet with Scouts Honor, and I scrunched Charbonneau all over, and then I put him under the bathtub water, tepid, which he did not like it one bit, but he was very good about putting up with it, and he no longer smells at all. But there was about 12, 16 hours when he was in the house, and getting rid of that odor is a little more challenging. It just still smells a little whiffy in here. And so tonight you may see some cameo appearances by certain other, something beyond just the unidentified unglet in the can. Just leave it at that. Anyway, today's beneficiary, I've gone on long enough, ladies and gentlemen. Today's beneficiary, the liberal snowplowing do-gooder beneficiary, is Dismas House of New Hampshire. Why Dismas House of New Hampshire, you might ask? Why not Dismas House of Vermont? Because Dismas House of New Hampshire shows up when you type in the fundraiser on Faceplant. So snooze, you lose in that game. But thank you to those who donated to Dismas House of New Hampshire, helping people who are just getting out of the slammer to try to get back on some sort of even keel of their lives. And we have a few people to thank. We have Ms. Meg Miser. Oh, that's the scent beads to get rid of some of the skunk smell. We have to thank Out there in Omaha, Nebraska, Mr. John Wilhelm. And this is the Great Sense Odor Neutralizer. It's a new fragrance. It eliminates odors in the air, carpet, and fabric. All right. And we have to thank Ms. Catherine Fisher. Oh, this is the Great Sense Smoke Odor Eliminator 6-in-1 Essential Oil Infused Premium Fragrance Aromatherapy. Eliminates odors, long-lasting fragrance, gentle mist spray, and quick action. Fortunately, the drugstore was having a sale on all these scent neutralizers, so I bought all of them. They were all just $1. And we have to thank, as ever, the wonderful Miss Terry Hudson. Oh, this is the Febreze Air Heavy Duty Plus, up to 2 times odor eliminating power versus base Febreze. And this is crisp and clean. All right. And we have to thank out there in Cincinnati, Ohio, Mr. J.T. Mayer. Oh, and this is the scented candle made in India that I don't think did a lick of good. It's nearly used up now. And we have to thank, in Bonneville, Massachusetts, with his brand new foot, Mr. Gary Pierce. And we have to thank, in Cuba. Actually, she didn't give anything this week. She just asked to get a shout out because apparently the faceplant donation thing doesn't work when you're in Cuba, unsurprisingly. In Cuba right now, planning great new Roots on the Rails trips in Cuba, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Sarah Ovenden. And lastly, out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they probably make great scents and Febreze and scent beads and scent candles, out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He always makes good sense, lady. Oh, what a bad pun that is. He makes good sense, ladies and gentlemen. My very, 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 very tall cousin, Mr. Nat Hunter, and his wonderful wife, Elise. Thank you all so much. Thank you all so much. So tonight's reading, The Day the Dam Broke. My memories of what my family and I went through during the 1913 flood in Ohio, I would gladly forget. And neither the hardships we endured nor the turmoil and confusion we experienced can alter my feeling toward my native state and city. I'm having a fine time now, and I wish Columbus were here. But if anyone ever wished the city was in hell, it was during that frightful and perilous afternoon in 1913 when the dam broke. Okay, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I said 1915, 1913. Google Columbus, Ohio, dam break 1913. See what you get. I'll start that sentence again. But if anyone ever wished the city was in hell, it was during that frightful and perilous afternoon in 1913 when the dam broke, or to be more exact, when everybody in town thought that the dam broke. We were both ennobled and demoralized by the experience. Grandfather especially rose to magnificent heights, which can never lose their splendor for me, even though his reactions to the flood were based upon a profound misconception, namely that Nathaniel Bedford Forrest cavalry was the menace that we were called upon to face. The only possible means of escape for us was to flee the house, a step which grandfather sternly forbade, brandishing his old army saber in his hand. "Let the sons of bitches come," he roared. Meanwhile, hundreds of people were streaming by our house, in wild panic, screaming, "Go east! Go east!" We had to stun grandfather with the ironing board. Impeded as we were by the inert form of the old gentleman, he was taller than 6 feet and weighed almost 175 pounds. We were passed in the first half mile by practically everybody else in the city. Had grandfather not come to at the corner of Parsons Avenue and Town Street, we would unquestionably have been overtaken and engulfed by the roaring waters, if there had been any roaring waters. Later, when the panic had died down and people had gone rather sheepishly back to their homes and their offices, minimizing the distances that they had run and offering various explanations for running, city engineers pointed out that even if the dam had broken, the water level would not have risen more than 2 additional inches in the west side. The west side was, at the time of the dam scare, under 30 feet of water, as indeed were all Ohio River towns during the great spring floods of 20 years ago. The east side, where we lived and where all the running occurred, had never been in any danger whatsoever. Only a rise of some 95 feet could have caused the floodwaters to flow over High Street, the thoroughfare that divided the east side of town from the west, and therefore engulfed the east side. The fact that we were all as safe as kittens under a cook stove did not, however, assuage in the least the fine despair and the grotesque desperation which seized upon the residents of the east side when the cry spread like a grass fire that the dam had given way. Some of the most dignified, staid, cynical, and clear-thinking people in town abandoned wives, husbands, stenographers, homes, offices, and they ran east. There are few alarms in the world more terrifying than the dam has broken. There are few people capable of stopping to reason when that clarion cry strikes upon the ears, even persons who live in towns no nearer than 500 miles to a dam. The Columbus, Ohio broken dam rumor began, as I recall it, around noon of March 12th, 1913. High Street, the main canyon of trade, was loud with the placid hum of business and the buzzing of placid businessmen arguing, computing, wheedling, offering, refusing, compromising. Darius Coningway, one of the foremost corporation lawyers in the Middle West, was telling the Public Utilities Commission in the language of Julius Caesar that they might as well try to move the Northern Star as to move him. Other men were making their little boasts and their little gestures. Suddenly, somebody began to run. It may be that he had simply remembered all of a moment an engagement to meet his wife, for which he was now frightfully late. Whatever it was, he ran east on Broad Street, probably toward the Maramore restaurant, a favorite place for men to meet his wife. Somebody else began to run, perhaps a newsboy in high spirits. Another man, a portly gentleman of affairs, broke into a trot. Inside of 10 minutes, everybody on High Street, from Union Depot to the courthouse, was running. A loud mumble gradually crystallized into the dread word, dam. The dam has broke. The fear was put into words by a little old lady in an electric, or by a traffic cop, or by a small boy. Nobody knows who, nor does it now really matter. 2,000 people were abruptly in full flight. Go east was the cry that arose. East, away from the river. East to safety. Go east! Go east! Go east! Black streams of people flowed eastward down all the streets leading in that direction. These streams, whose headwaters were in the dry goods stores, the office buildings, the harness shops, the movie theaters, were fed by trickles of housewives, of children, cripples, servants, dogs, cats, slipping out of the houses past which the main stream flowed, shouting, screaming, People ran out, leaving fires burning and food cooking and doors wide open. I remember, however, that my mother turned out all the fires and that she took with her a dozen eggs and 2 loaves of bread. It was her plan to make Memorial Hall just 2 blocks away and take refuge somewhere in the top of it, in one of those dusty rooms where war veterans met and where old battle flags and stage scenery were stored. But the seething throngs shouting, "Go east!" drew her along and the rest of us with her. When grandfather regained full consciousness at Parsons Avenue, he turned upon the retreating mob like a vengeful prophet and exhorted the men to form ranks and to stand off the rebel dogs. But at length, he too got the idea that the dam had broken and, roaring, "Go east!" in his powerful voice, he caught up in one arm a small child and in the other a slight, clerkish man of perhaps 42. And we slowly began to gain on those ahead of us. A scattering of firemen, policemen, and army officers in dress uniforms. There'd been a review at Fort Hayes in the northern part of town, added color to the surging billows of people. "Go east!" cried a little child in a piping voice as she ran past a porch on which drowsed a lieutenant colonel of infantry. Excuse me a moment, ladies and gentlemen, my throat's out. Oh, no, this is the smoke odor eliminator. My throat's a little irritated by all these fine, powerful scents in the air. "Go east!" cried a little child in a piping voice as she ran past a porch on which drowsed the lieutenant colonel of infantry. Used to quick decisions, trained to immediate obedience, the officer bounded off the porch and, running at full tilt, soon passed the child, bawling, "Go east!" The 2 of them emptied rapidly the houses of the little street they were on. "What is it? What is it?" demanded a fat, waddling man who intercepted the colonel. The officer dropped behind and asked the little child what it was. "The dam is broke," gasped the girl. "The dam is broke," roared the colonel. "Go east! Go east! Go east!" He was soon leading, with the exhausted child in his arms, a fleeing company of 300 persons who had gathered around him from living rooms, from shops, garages, backyards, basements. Nobody has ever been able to compute with any exactness exactly how many people took part in the Great Rout of 1913, for the panic, which extended from the Winslow Bottling Works in the South End to Clintonville, 6 miles north, ended as abruptly as it began, and the bobtail and ragtag and velvet gowned groups of refugees melted away and slunk home, leaving the streets peaceful and deserted. The shouting, weeping, tangled evacuation of the city lasted not more than 2 hours in all. Some people got as far east as Reynoldsburg, 12 miles away. 50 or more reached the country club, 8 miles away. Most of the others gave up, exhausted, or climbed trees in Franklin Park, 4 miles out. Order was restored and fear dispelled finally by means of militiamen riding about in motor lorries, bawling through megaphones, "The dam has not broken." At first, this tended only to add to the confusion and increase the panic, for many stampeders thought the soldiers were bellowing, "The dam has now broken," thus setting an official seal of authentication upon the calamity. All the time, the sun shone quietly, and there was nowhere any sign of oncoming waters. A visitor in an airplane looking down on the straggling, agitated masses of people below would have been hard put to it to divine a reason for the phenomenon. It must have inspired in such an observer a peculiar kind of terror, like the sight of the Marie Celeste abandoned at sea, its galley fires peacefully burning, its tranquil decks bright in the sunlight. An aunt of mine, Aunt Edith Taylor, was in a movie theater on High Street when, over and above the sound of the piano in the pit, a W.S. Hart picture was being shown. There rose the steadily increasing tromp of running feet. Persistent shouts rose above the tromping. An elderly man sitting near my aunt mumbled something, got out of his seat, and went up the aisle at a dog trot. This startled everybody. In an instant, the audience was jamming the aisles. "Fire!" shouted a woman who always expected to be burned up in the theater, but now the shouts outside were louder and coherent. "The dam is broke!" cried somebody. "Go east!" screamed a small woman in front of my aunt, and east they went, pushing and shoving and clawing, knocking women and children down, emerging finally into the street, torn and sprawling. Inside the theater, Bill Hart was calmly calling some desperado's bluff, and the brave girl at the piano played Row, Row, Row loudly, and then In My Harem. Outside, men were streaming across the State House yard. Others were climbing trees. A woman managed to get up onto the "These Are My Jewels" statue, whose bronze figures of Sherman, Stanton, Grant, and Sheridan watched with cold unconcern the going to pieces of the capital city. I ran south to State Street, east on State to 3rd, south on 3rd to Town, and out east on Town, my Aunt Edith has written me. A tall, spare woman with grim eyes and a determined chin ran past me down the middle of the street. I was still uncertain as to what was the matter in spite of all the shouting. I drew up alongside this woman with some effort, for though she was in her late 50s, she had a beautiful, easy running form and seemed to be in excellent condition. "What is it?" I puffed. She gave me a quick glance and then looked ahead again, stepping up her pace a trifle. "Don't ask me, ask God," she said. When I reached Grant Avenue, I was so spent that Dr. H.R. Mallory, you remember Dr. Mallory, the man with the white beard who looks like Robert Browning? Well, Dr. Mallory, who I had drawn away from at the corner of 5th and Town, passed me. "It's got us," he shouted. And I felt sure that whatever it was did have us, for you know what conviction Dr. Mallory's statements always carried. I didn't know at the time what he meant, but I found out later. There was a boy behind him on roller skates, and Dr. Mallory mistook the swishing of the skates for the sound of rushing water. He eventually reached the Columbus School for Girls on the corner of Parsons and Town Street, where he collapsed, expecting the cold, frothing waters of the Scioto to sweep him into oblivion. The boy on the skates swirled past him, and Dr. Mallory realized for the first time what he had been running from. Looking back up the street, he could see no signs of water. But nevertheless, after resting a few minutes, he jogged on east again. I should say that about 700 people passed us. A funny thing was that all of them were on foot. Nobody seemed to have had the courage to stop and start their car, but as I remember it, all cars had to be cranked in those days, which is probably the reason. The next day, the city went about its business as if nothing had happened, but there was no joking. It was 2 years or more before you dared treat the breaking of the dam lightly. And even now, 20 years after, there are few persons like Dr. Mallory who will shut up like a clam if you mention the afternoon of the Great Run. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back next week. Hopefully the air will have cleared in here at Hadley Street. Hopefully Dr. Charbonneau will not have had another altercation with a small mammal who does not approve of Dr. Charbonneau. And we will have next week the night the ghost got in. You take good care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.